Hi, everyone, and welcome to the AI Risk Reward Podcast. I'm super excited today to have our guest, Yvonne Kanner. She's a managing partner and co-founder at TRIA Capital Partners. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you, Alec. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. Our theme today is the future of wealth management. So that obviously involves AI as well as, changes we're seeing there, people like you investing, making minority investments in wealth managers. So super, super exciting. But first, I kind of want to go back in time and ask, how did you get here? So you went to school. What was your first job? How did you end up at a venture capital firm or starting a venture capital firm?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because there's definitely a link to all of this. I'm originally from Mexico City, and since I was little, I had the entrepreneurial bug in me. And, you know, my family moved here to the United States, and then when I went to school, I only wanted to go to one school and I wanted to study business. It was because it wasn't the thing that women did at that time. So I've always had this bug of doing the contrarian thing. And that was the beginning of it all. And so when I went to school, I decided I wanted to study finance, I wanted to study marketing and entrepreneurial management. I always had it in my head that somehow you needed to combine all of these things. And when I was graduating, I had the opportunity to join a very large firm that was actually experimenting with an entrepreneurial startup venture. And that I thought about that and I said, that's a unique opportunity. You don't usually get to be in a group where, a public company is going out and starting something and it involves M&A and they're going to try to create something from nothing. And that was how my career started. I joined Merrill Lynch. They wanted to compete on the institutional asset management side. They were dominant on the retail side. But it was the world of asset management what had just gone through the consolidation, concentration, M&A flurry, and Merrill Lynch felt like it had missed out. And so this group was created to really compete for institutional mandates. That was the beginning of my career, and everything I learned from that beginning to today is like how large competitors compete, when they give in, when it works, can they innovate? Can you innovate as a very large company? Why is it that small companies, startups tend to win on the innovation side? All very relevant to, I think, the world we're in today and artificial intelligence and how everybody decides to really compete and approach the value that you can get from it.
Wow, that's amazing. What an incredible start to a career. It's funny because I like talking about the Merrill Lynch approach to, hey, how do we figure out which financial advisors are going to be successful? They go hire like 1,000 kids out of college and see who's left in 5 years. That's how they figure it out, right? So, so the punchline being, it's really hard to figure that out, right? So, they just see who wins. So through that journey, obviously, you must have had some mentors or figures who influenced you. Talk about that.
Yeah, it was also the beginning of how I learned that leadership, you can have the perfect idea, but if you don't have the team that's motivated and you don't have the leadership team that can really pivot and innovate, and you can have a plan, but nothing goes to plan. And so I had a mentor at Merrill. He was the head of the group, and he really was the one that, in a sense, it was my pivot to my career for asset management and then investment in wealth management firms, because we did 3 startups together, and then after that with my partners here today.
Wow, that's amazing. So, wow, 3 startups is a lot for most people, but not for you.
I told you I had the bug.
So tell us a story there. So pick one of those startups and tell us a story about that.
Yeah, so let's just start with the first one. It was really the idea of it came from what you see. Merrill at a certain point gave up on doing individual M&A, buying this institutional money managers and folding them into Mother Merrill, because each one was just not significant to its balance sheet. It was just, it's taking too long. And that was lesson number one. Lesson number two was you still had this marketplace where you did not have access to incredible talent on the money management side for the retail investor. And there was also these new companies, these independent financial advisory companies that were coming out of the brokerages that didn't have access to this type of investment products. So the idea behind that was, okay, Merrill's not going to do this, but we can create mutual funds for these incredible money managers that only want to manage separate accounts for very large institutions, the CalPERS of the world. They don't want to go out and do distribution. So we'll do the distribution, we'll do the marketing, something that they hated. We'll put together the mutual fund, we'll deal with the operational aspects of it. And that was the beginning of Undiscovered Managers Funds. Then this was 1997, 98. And if you think about it, there were more mutual funds than today you would say Starbucks. Or how do you distribute mutual funds when you are competing with the behemoths? Why would anybody give you an appointment to listen to you? And so we started talking about the business of our clients rather than our actual products. And that was also, so lesson number two, how to build a brand, how to connect, how to create a network, and how to create a community that's interested in what you have to say, and how to really understand segmentation and build products for the people that you are working with. So that was the beginning of my working with independent wealth management firms. And at that time, when we started, a very large firm had 100 million in assets under management.
Wow.
So those were the firms that, the founders were quoted in all the magazines and the newspapers. And the big question at that time was, okay, they are incredible businesses. Clients see a reason. They want fiduciary advice. They want independent advice. Can they evolve? Can this become a business that's multi-generational? The clients want that. They are giving them financial advice for their family. Or are they just going to have to sell themselves? And we, as a team, started writing papers on the coming evolution of wealth management. That's how then my trajectory starts in wealth management, in the managing of the business of wealth management, and going forward. Ultimately, the funds were sold around 2004, 2005, and that was the next step in the next startup. And the reason for that one was the advisors that we worked with came to us and they said, you're right, this is my largest asset. I don't want to sell my firm to a bank. I want to do an internal transition, but there's nothing that allows me to do that. The industry was too small for the large capital sources. And that's when we created the first minority investment solution for wealth management. And that was Fiduciary Network. Our first transaction was done in 2007, end of 2006, then our second one in 2007, and went through the great financial crisis. Before we got bought out, we had done 14 platform firms, 9 sub-acquisitions, and the network itself had about 40 billion in assets under management.
Awesome. That's great. So talk about starting TRIA Capital Partners with your partners, obviously.
Yeah. So when we got bought out, the three of us met and we had a yellow legal pad and we had a couple of questions. First, do we want to work with each other? Then it was, is there something different for us to do in wealth management? We understood where we were in the competitive environment, that the industry was about to go through a tornado, an M&A tornado. The demographic aspects of the industry and where people were in their lives, we knew that a lot of firms were going to want to sell. So could we, and we also knew that private equity and investors were all circling around, and everybody was now interested in wealth management. It was such an incredible industry. The client relationships last 20 to 30 years. The stability, and on top of everything, the advisors get to work with clients and help them find solutions for their lives and make them, get incredible results over 30 years. So our biggest question was, could we do something in a differentiated way? And what had we learned? What were the lessons from the last 15 years being investors in wealth management firms? And how would we change what we were doing? And there were a couple of things that we decided would change in the way that we looked at the industry. Our first version of this was really an industry bet. You didn't know if these firms could evolve, but you knew that the industry was incredibly stable and that you could invest in the firms and you had this diversified group of companies. Where deals went wrong was when you had misalignment. So these are people businesses. Clients don't go to these firms and ask them to help them with their life decisions because of who the investor is. They want to face the individual, and you're talking about incredibly personal situations that are being discussed every day. So, recognizing that you had to be aligned with the capital source, the partners, founders, and the next generation leadership and the shareholders of the firm. So that was why we created TRIA, because we thought there were going to be a few number of firms that were going to be the dominant competitors in the future. And we also knew that whereas before it was incredibly fragmented and the custodians did a lot of the innovation for the industry, most of these firms, the largest expense was compensation. There wasn't a lot of thought from a strategic planning standpoint on investment and innovation. We knew that was going to change, and the competitive environment was going to change dramatically. There's going to be competition for clients, competition for employees, competition for other partners, and we knew that scale was going to be a necessary but insufficient part of all of this. So whereas in our prior firm, we wanted fiduciary wealth management firms, and that was kind of the profile of the firms that we were looking for. And we also wanted to see, okay, who was the founding generation? Did they have next generation? Where were we going with this? In TRIA, the number one thing we look for is really the leadership team. Where do they have a vision? Where do they want to go with this? Everybody. You don't have to have the same plan, you don't have to have the same strategy, but you have to have a vision for what the firm is supposed to be and what you're trying to do. And can we help them? Can we be aligned in everything that we're doing and the way that we invest with them? That was it. We wanted to invest in the best of the firms of wealth management, not just make an industry bet.
That's amazing. And what are a couple of things you think you can be helpful to management of a wealth management firm as an investor into them?
Sure. A lot of times, the leadership team of wealth management firms are very busy putting out the day-to-day fires, and investors, and not just us, investors are always very helpful in getting the leadership team to step out and think strategically and really think about, okay, where are we going with this? And how are we going to make investments? There's also, part of this is change management, and change makes us all nervous as you're evolving the firms. The firms in wealth management have a couple of things that are very interesting. They are growing, everybody's scaling, so you're growing rapidly, and you're also evolving from who the leadership is and who the employees are. This demographic situation where the founders 15 years ago, the average age of the founders was beginning to be in the 60s, and the average age of a participant was in the 50s. And you couldn't replace enough people. So that, go forward to today, that demographic push or pressure has gotten even worse. So you have to make sure that as an investor, you're addressing all of these issues. And this industry, it's the elephant in the room. of people don't want to talk about, okay, there are different interests, right? Depending on people are in their life cycle. There's different ways to approach the investment in the firm and what they want to do. And there's not one single answer. It's just, how do you get the best possible solution for all the participants at the firm? And a lot of that, it's normal not to know. You may think you want to do one thing, but when you get all the people in a room, you realize that you have very different opinions and also a realistic perspective of what the firm needs to do. The investors, our experiences, we've seen every type of issue, evolution of these firms, building new products, developing new channels, markets, and then just evolving their operating platform. Sometimes you just have to have the conversation of, okay, what's going on in all of those stages, and get people that are in leadership away from the day-to-day management, the fires.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And, talking about wealth management and the future of wealth management, look, there are obviously a lot of exciting things going on today with AI. There's a lot of changes going on in wealth management itself, as you point out, with venture capital getting involved and generational transitions, not just of ownership of the wealth management firms, but also of the assets being managed as the baby boomers leave their money to the next generation. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really an interesting question because the statistics don't bode well for the incumbent, right? When someone unfortunately passes, usually the estate is shared across the different heirs, and they're going to have different wishes with regards to how their money is managed. Now, this is more in the high net worth segment and the mass affluent segment. If you are in the family office segment, that's a different conversation because it's a lot more complex. And so maybe those relationships are stickier, but you still have the same phenomena that sometimes it's the client or the heir does not want to have the parent's advisor. They want something clean and just new conversation. Or they just haven't had access, or they may just perceive the firm as old school, right? So this particularly is an interesting question with regards to how people communicate. There's a lot of questions regarding Gen Z and how they're going to want to interact. But also just, are they going to view an advisory firm as old school versus maybe, I don't know, Robin Hood? I don't think the parallels are there. I think when life events happen, people want advice and they want human advice. And I think this is the part that also gets misunderstood with regards to wealth management. And it's the big question with regards to digital transformation and AI, because the one big error that I worry about is that wealth management will do the same thing that healthcare did. And I think there's a lot of parallels. Yes, they're very different industries. In healthcare, you have the issue of very different who the payer is, but it's the same concept of who's setting the incentives, but more importantly, this issue of scaling, right? How are you going to approach scaling and how that affects your relationship with your client or your patient. In healthcare, I think they botched it up completely. You had mass consolidation, you had one-stop shop medical centers that have every specialty, but nobody knows who you are as a patient. And the technology has not been used for the good of the patients. It's been used as friction. So when you go to an appointment and they give you the iPad and you have to fill out the 30-question iPad questionnaire that the doctor never looks at, you lose all faith and confidence in your appointment. So I think digital is great. I think AI is great. I think those are table stakes, but they should solve to more human. So if the healthcare system had done it correctly, doctors would have more time with their patients. And it's done exactly the opposite. They're trying to figure out how can we make the doctor-patient meeting 10 minutes instead of 15 minutes? And okay, now they're not going to meet with a doctor. That's a very quick way to tell someone, well, then you're paying too much for the service. It's not worth it. You can just interact with my website and my digital questionnaire.
Yeah, scary stuff, and quite on point, and happening globally, right? Not just happening in the U.S. Like everywhere. It's oh yeah, the doctor will see you for 6 minutes, and by the way, your open heart surgery. Yeah, we've got an appointment 8 weeks out here in Canada or whatever, right? So yeah, it's
And
definitely an issue.
and the part that I think is important is patients didn't want to interact digitally, right? They would like to get advice from the human. They want to talk about something so personal and where a lot of times is related to fears. They would like the time. And that's why I keep pointing back to it in things that I write and when I talk to different advisors. You know, it's a win when you can personalize what you're doing and you can identify for your clients before they even thought of the issue. So data and AI, I think, are phenomenal technologies to help us better take care of clients, but they are not replacement technologies.
Yeah, that's such a great point. It's not about, hey, how can I make the advisor's meeting with clients shorter? It's how can we make it better?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so let's also think about potential ethical issues in deploying AI. Maybe that's in wealth management, maybe that's more broadly in banking or lending or whatever. Is there anything that particularly concerns you there?
Yeah, many things. Where do I start? Well, the first thing I worry about is with regards to AI, and I've said this to you before. We humans, I'm going to get in trouble for this. We're lazy, right? We are, and sometimes you'll prompt the AI engine and you'll ask it a question, and it'll publish something that's just phenomenal. And it's page after page after page, and human beings are being told you're going to be the co-pilot of this. But the reality is that I worry about humans defaulting to this sounds so good, and we are not able to see where the AI has mistakes, and it will have mistakes. It's a feature of it, right? You can't have enough memory. You get for all the different reasons. So I still go back to the humanities has to stay where it needs to stay. You have to figure that out. I think that's the most challenging part of implementation of AI. How do you figure out the combination of human, digital, and AI? I worry about people implementing things before understanding them and not thinking about the risks. And there's always a way to mitigate them, but people are so hungry to be forward thinking, to be AI forward. But the reality is that these are technologies that are changing so quickly and they are getting adopted so quickly that in wealth management, I worry about clients understanding what it means. What does it mean when all of your biometrics are now in a server? How do you, as a firm, from a cybersecurity standpoint, how do you help your clients understand the value of their data and when not to give it out? There's a lot of education that has to happen, and I think we're going so fast that I worry about those first steps. And then the thing that I worry about the most with AI, I really worry about a segment of the population that will be left behind and in complete isolation. And I've seen it happened this weekend. We were trying to get a passport, and you cannot get a hold of the consular office with a telephone number. You are now forced to do this through a digital link, and then you have to have a WhatsApp account, and then you have to talk to this automated response thing. And I can do it, and people who are used to working with technology can do it. But if you have someone who is older, who is scared of technology, and they just want to talk to a human being because they need to get their passport renewed, and they've basically been erased. That's effectively how I viewed it. If you didn't do it this way, there was no one you could talk to. I worry about
Wow.
that.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great point. So let's think about advice. So there are hundreds of thousands of financial advisors, in the country. Obviously, the most popular thing for advisors to do is run out there and get an AI note taker. I don't know how many there are now, 25, 30, whatever, specifically for wealth managers. But beyond that, what's your advice to individual advisors or RIAs in terms of adopting AI the right way?
Yeah, and specifically in wealth management and on the independent side, I think you can't do digital transformation, you can't adopt AI if you don't have good data. So this is where I'm saying people are firing before they're aiming. I hate to say it that way, but nobody wants to talk about the boring stuff, which is data. Do the professionals at the firm have a culture of putting things in their CRM? How is your data kept? Is it consistent? Does everybody have the same definitions of things? Because the old adage of garbage in, garbage out. Yeah, a lot of money is going to be wasted trying to predict things with bad data. Now, there's a lot of AI solutions to clean up the data now, which is a lot more efficient and less cost prohibitive for smaller firms, which is great. But I just wish firms would start at the very simple. Don't even clean up the past data from today going forward. Get your house in order, and then get someone in the firm has to become a subject matter expert, understanding what this is, what the risks are, when you're making decisions, what do they mean. And then the third thing, in wealth management particularly, technology has always been thought of as a back office. And I think that has to change, and AI should not be thought of like, how do you turn the lights on, or does Microsoft Word work and it's back office. It should be front office, and it should be separated from just, are the lights working and are your servers working. You really need to think about it strategically, understand what the potential of AI is, and then also understand the risks behind it. And the decision making has to be different than if you're trying to solve just how things get connected. And I'm not trying to put down the technology group; they're already dealing with a lot of things. I just think that AI it needs a different type of thinking, and it needs to be brought into the strategic planning and the board.
Totally agree. Well, that's why Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan has a chief AI officer reporting directly to him, not to the CTO, not to the CIO, directly to Jamie Dimon. That's how important it is. And I echo your thoughts on, look, getting risk and compliance right for AI are going to be critical in a regulated industry. Otherwise, you're going to wake up with a deficiency letter from the SEC, or worse, have some kind of data breach that could just ruin your whole business. So, yeah. So anyway, we're gonna move on to our lightning round.
Okay.
So I'm gonna mention certain things, and you tell us whether you think they're underrated or overrated, and maybe a sentence or two why. So I'm not trying to get you in trouble, but Mexican food in Dallas, underrated or overrated?
Definitely overrated. Tex-Mex is wonderful. We have a lot of Mexican food. It's gotten better, but we were known much more for Tex-Mex, not real Mexican food. I'm sorry to say.
Go to Mexico City.
Yes, definitely.
It's not that far. AI-driven financial planners, underrated or overrated?
Underrated. AI-driven financial planners does not mean AI replacing financial planners. I think the AI can give you a superpower, but the human has to understand how to use it and what's behind it, and then also the risks behind it. But I just think AI is going to be, just like we talk about table stakes, you have to have the internet, you have to have email, you have to have AI is part of it, and it's part of the client's daily life now.
Yeah. Uh, Networking events in the finance industry, which I'll throw Money 2020 into that bucket.
Mm, I think COVID really did a number on everybody. And so I'm going to say networking events are underrated and everybody should go in person with and meet with as many people as possible. This is the same theme I am going to throw out with regards to you should solve to more people. And I do really worry. You asked me my worries and that isolation and the people who feel isolated. So I'm going to err on the side of more people events.
Yeah. Personalized portfolio recommendations powered by AI, underrated or overrated?
I think probably underrated. I don't think the power of AI has been understood yet
Mm-hmm.
because of this issue of data. I think there's a lot of, there's going to be a lot of papers about why this doesn't work or that doesn't work. But I ultimately believe that it'll be worked out. And this is going so fast that I'm not going to bet against it.
Yeah. Social media breaking down geographic barriers for RIAs.
Mm, Overrated. I really don't think it does. I think, I actually think social media isolates people even more.
Mm. Regulators' ability to keep up with AI in finance.
um, I don't. I've heard that they're approaching it differently. If the past is any lesson, overrated, right? It's not the regulator's fault. It's just how our government works. And it just reminds me of there's a story when CD-ROMs became available. And there was a pharmaceutical company was trying to get a drug approved. And the FDA used to get reams, truckloads of just paper with all the research and the trials and everything. And they got a CD-ROM that they could upload and have all the data of it. They just weren't ready to review it. So I think it's just, if the government doesn't do the same thing that we're saying firms should do, which is front office, figuring out, and it's the same thing as cybersecurity. Firms were asked to prepare and to safeguard against risks that are really national risks. And there was never a national response from a cybersecurity standpoint. Now, maybe there is, and I'm not giving the government enough credit. Okay, just from my perspective as a small company person, I just think companies feel very much, what can they do? They don't have the billions to invest in cybersecurity. I think AI is a little bit like that, right? You have certain factors, government to government factors that individual companies are not going to be able to solve, but they don't have to, right? This is more just being aware of how it works and protect yourself the best you can.
Yeah, makes sense. Dallas Cowboys fandom, underrated or overrated?
Fairly rated. I'm not going to get in trouble on that. I live in Dallas.
And the classic Disney movie Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, underrated or overrated?
Uh, I guess underrated because it catapulted the company. So if I think about from an innovation standpoint, I guess underrated. From just the movie itself, overrated.
What's funny now is, of course, all these movies are done with computers, and back then they literally had people drawing every frame, right? Incredible. Anyway, this has been a lot of fun. Yvonne, thanks for coming on the show. This has been Yvonne Kanner, managing partner and co-founder at TRIA Capital Partners. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex.
All right.